All right, people. Last video, we talked about buttons and how to style them. Give them nice rounded edges, make them look super pretty, right? And you watched a couple of videos and you played around with some buttons. So you did this right here, and then you showed me, and I checked off that you had messed around with the buttons enough to where I feel like you know enough about them. And then you took this quiz. So if you did not do well on this quiz, you need to revisit this information or ask me to make sure you get this information. Otherwise, you're going to be lost when we move on. Also, we're going to be reviewing some of the CSS style stuff that you need to keep in the front part of your brain here. So open that head up and shove this information inside of it. All right. Ignore the sound of crinkling. Those are animals playing in a bunch of packing paper that just came in a package. None of your business what it is. Just kidding. It's sunscreen. All right. So we got some buttons right here. One says Apple, one says Samsung, one says Sony. And we have a class called group. This is up there in the style tag. And then we have down here 3 buttons. We have an Apple button, a Samsung, and a Sony button. Now, a couple new things. We have something called a div tag, which you've never seen before unless you've researched it on your own. A div tag stands for division. And what it wants us to do, or what it's allowing us to do, is dividing these buttons into their own group. Without the div tag, it's just 3 separate buttons. With the div tag, it wraps them, all 3 buttons, into a group. So whatever we do to the div tag happens to all 3 things inside of it, or however many things we put inside of it. So the div creates a division. It creates a group from the rest of the information on the page. And we're going to be using those a lot in the next coming modules. Now, another new thing is notice that this class is called group, just simply group, and it's filled with buttons. So I'm going to put inside this group, I'm going to put a paragraph just for the heck of it. And I'll put a heck of it inside of it. And notice when I run this now that inside the div, so with these 3 buttons, I put heck of it. And so it just put heck of it off to the side. Notice it did not style it like the buttons, even though it was in this group. And we're going to talk about why right now. This class is just called group. And in this group, we have 3 buttons and a paragraph. Now, when we go up to the style, we have a class, so period group. So that's the class name. But then after the class name, we put the word button. So what this does is it tells the browser, hey, look at the class group, and then inside that group, look for buttons, and then do all of this to the buttons. Now, if I put paragraph, or P, and ran it, it would do it to the paragraph text instead of the buttons. So whenever we have a class talking about a div with a bunch of things inside of it, after the class name, we put the part or the thing inside the div that we want to give all this style to. In this case, all 3 buttons. So I'm going to remove the heck of it paragraph now that we got that. So let's look at what's inside the style. Same stuff as we've seen before with buttons. Background color, border. So this might be a little new unless you've done your own research. The text color is white. Gave it some padding to make it bigger. And then there's a new one called float, which float left and you can float right. And that's what that would look like. So if you wanted to put some sort of navigation on the right side, you can just simply float it left or float it right, depending on which side you want it on. So I'm going to float it back left. Now, some things to notice here. Notice how there's a little gap in between these buttons? That's because I gave it a border. I gave it a border that's 1 pixel thick. It's a solid border, and it's colored white. So I could put the border the same color as the background color, and that would make it all blend together like that. Or I could take the border out completely and give us back our default borders. Or I can say border none, and that will take away the borders. But I feel like that looks kind of weird, and people might not know those are buttons if they're all like together like that. So I'll make it, and I'll put the border to 5 pixels thick. We're going to make it solid, not dashed or anything weird like that. And we are going to make it white. That spaces out our buttons quite a bit here. Okay? Now, that kind of takes care of it for this video. The next video is going to talk about how to make a group of buttons set vertically on top of one another instead of horizontally like this, left and right. So that will look a little bit different.